Hi everybody. Thanks for joining us, whether you're here live or watching the video afterwards. So we have gotten a lot of new followers since the last time I did a video, because it's been quite a while. So my name's Becca. I'm kind of the person behind Shadowed Behavior. And in this video we're going to talk about shaping. So we're going to really dive into specifically like how you can shape a behavior with your horse. And we're going to use the example today of teaching your horse to smile, because I've taught my first horse Shadow to smile, and then recently I've been working with my newer mare Roxy on teaching her to smile, and we did that yesterday. I was just going through the motions with her and realizing sort of how complex it is. So we posted yesterday saying that we were going to do this video. I usually like to make a post so that like it's just you can read it, you don't really have to listen along so much, but we have so much to say about shaping because there's just so much going on that I felt like we needed to make a video. So we're going to dive in. First, I'm going to give you guys the definition of shaping that comes from The Whale, or my big giant applied behavior analysis book written by Cooper, Heron, and Heward. So you'll see I've got things tabbed on the side, and one of the things that I've tabbed is the definition of shaping. So they define shaping as using differential reinforcement to produce a series of gradually changing response classes. Each response class is a successive approximation toward a terminal behavior. Members of an existing response class are selected for differential reinforcement because they more closely resemble the terminal behavior. And then in parentheses it says, see also differential reinforcement, response class, response differentiation, and successive approximations. So that was just like a whole lot of terminology that I'm not expecting people who aren't a professional in the field of behavior to really know. So my job today and what I plan to do is sort of break this definition down so you can use it and you can apply it with your horse to teach them new things. So shaping, the two key terms inside of the definition that we need to know about is going to be differential reinforcement and successive approximations. So I'm going to close my big book and we're going to go through. So when you shape a behavior, you start with, of course, where you are, but you also want to have like your end behavior like in your mind's eye, right? So for smiling, what I like my horse to do when I tell them to smile is if I like wiggle my finger at them, I want them to stick their head up and I want them to stick their upper lip up, right? And kind of like show their teeth. And horses can do this naturally. Like I'm sure you've seen a horse doing this before. So when you shape a behavior, you want to know what your horse can do now and what you want them to do. So I know what I want them to do, and now I have to figure out what they can do now and how I am able to motivate them to engage in the behavior. So what I'll start with doing for shaping, what I started with yesterday for Roxy was just simply showing her that I had a treat. Because I'm going to use what's called positive reinforcement to teach my horses to do this one little trick. It's just easier. It's generally just like a more preferred stimulus that they have to act in order to get. So she knows if she's working for a treat, I show her a treat, and all I started doing was, there's kind of two steps to this. So first they've got to stick their head up, and then secondly they have to stick their lip up. And then they put it all together and they stick their head up and they stick their lip up at the same time and they're smiling. So first I just started with putting her on the cross ties, kind of standing there with her, and I just gave her a treat and I gave her some love and I just sort of, let her know that like, listen, we're going to work for this positive thing. I'm going to sort of be your window to reinforcement in the behavior world. We'll call this like pairing. So essentially like, look, I can give you access to good things. We're going to try to get good things. And then as you pair a little bit, which you should be paired with your horse like already, like, be kind to them and like work with them, kind of have that bond. But doing a little bit extra pairing before you start to teach a new skill or place excessive demands is just going to help you get there. So I just kind of gave her some love. Plus, I love my horses, so obviously I'm going to love on them from time to time. And then what I started doing is I just started like taking a treat and I would sort of poke it on her nose, or let her sniff it, or sort of do the typical, like, look, I have a treat sort of hand motion, like how you usually feed them so they can see it. And then I would lift it up. I would, like, take it right in front of her nose and, like, lift it up. So she actually had to, like, lift her head up. And when she lifted her head up, I kept my hand there and fed her the treat from that standpoint. This is one of the most important things with shaping, is that you want to give reinforcement the second that that behavior that you want happens. Now, obviously, I'm not looking for this horse to just stick her head up, but I'm looking to break this behavior almost into steps so she learns to move forward with it. And each step is going to be what's called that successive approximation, right? So the first successive approximation that I'm going to have with my horse is that she sticks her head up. So I do that a few times, and I work with her on just sticking her head up. What I do from there is I keep working on having her stick her head up, and each time I just try to get it a little higher, because the first time I do it, I'm not going to stick my hand all the way up in the air and be like, come on, really stretch for it, because she's going to be like, why bother? So I start with a little at a time, and each time I'm just going to take my hand a little higher and a little higher and a little higher until it's at the height where I want it. And I bit off more than I could chew with this yesterday, because my gelding is 15 hands and my mare is 16.3, so I was really reaching by the end of this. So that still is you working towards your successive approximations, though, because now you're not changing necessarily or adding in another step to the behavior, but you're adding in like the intensity, and you're changing like the actual topography of that one step. So we started with raising your head 3 inches. Now you have to raise your head 4 inches, and now you have to go up 6 until you get it to where you want. From there, what I wanted to have her do, and this was kind of harder to teach, and it takes a lot of focus to get something like this done, because you need to shape it correctly, and you need to provide reinforcement the second that behavior occurs. So after I had her sort of getting her head to where I wanted it to go, what I would do next is I would poke her on the lip, or kind of like tease her with the treat, so she had to stick her lip up trying to get it. So once she started kind of sticking her lip up trying to get it, I would reinforce that. So once she stuck her lip up with her head up, she would get the treat. But this means now, at this new step, this new successive approximation towards the terminal behavior of smiling, now if she wants to get the treat and all she does is stick her head up, but she does not move her lip, then I'm not giving her the treat. I'm looking only to reinforce behaviors that are closer and closer and closer to my end goal. And it's not going to be like a snap your fingers and it's done sort of things. These things take time for the horse to learn. And I went at this with her yesterday for maybe 30 minutes, but that doesn't mean that if I go there today, she's going to be like, yeah, I perfectly remember this. So it's a matter of working with your horse where they're at, and then continually working with them on this skill. This is not something that they're just going to have done. You're going to want to probe for maintenance, probe for generalization, work on all these other things. So that leads to sort of the last thing. Eventually what I'm going to want, my end goal, includes me. So I want to be able to wiggle my finger, and she should stick her lip up. How am I going to get to that? That's going to take something that's going to be many steps down the road. And what you're looking for there specifically is something kind of called stimulus control. So you're looking for her to respond to the specific stimulus that I'm putting out there. So what I will most likely start to do, and this is just my plan, and you don't have to stick to your plan. If things change, then roll with it and just sort of be ready to follow that. But what I am going to start doing is I can do one of two things. So I can either make it so she's got this skill down, where like she knows that this, like when I put the treat up there, she has to do it. Or I can do it so that when she's up there, then I can signal and then slowly work my behavior down. So I don't want to raise my hand super high all the time. It makes my arm hurt, and I'm a lazy person. So if I can just do this and get my horse to do a cute little trick, then I'd rather do that. So what I can either do is sort of go more with like classical conditioning, and I can be like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to ask you to do the thing. So I can pair this with the stimulus that actually gets her to engage in the behavior, which right now is having my hand really high. And eventually she's going to learn, okay, when she does this, then she asks me to do this, and she'll be able to just do it from this. An unconditioned stimulus gets paired with a conditioned stimulus. So, moving forward, another thing that I could do is once my hand is up there, I can wiggle my finger and then slowly work on just fading my finger down and fading the prompt until it's just right here. and she engages in the behavior. What's important to remember here is that this is not going to go as well as you want it to go. And that's fine. Like, I feel like so often in the world of equestrianism especially, if you don't get it right the first time, people assume that you just don't know what you're doing. And that's not the case. It's going to take a lot of trial and error, and there's nothing wrong with being wrong as long as you go back and analyze it and then try something new. You know, come through with your science and your scientific evidence-based strategies and work through it. Not everything you try is going to work, and there could be 1,000 reasons. If Roxy halfway through stopped responding to these cues, it could be anything. She could have lost interest. She's a horse. She could be spooking at something. There are other horses running around in the field behind her. She was very concerned about that while I was training her. She might not like the treat anymore. I may have given her too many of the treat, which could go hand in hand with her not liking it anymore, or it could, you know, you don't want to make them sick. And then other things that you want to consider are just a matter of how your behavior is going to change. So I've made a post about this a while ago, and going back to that sort of stimulus control idea, like, I don't want Roxy every time I come up to her just sticking her lip up and hoping to get a treat, because that's what Shadow was starting to do, is that anytime I went over him, he's like, if I do this trick, I'm going to get a treat. So keeping it under stimulus control means that it's only really in response to the stimulus that I put it under, which is me wiggling my finger at my horse. I don't want them to do it all of the time. One, because it's just sort of rude. And two, because, I mean, if you think of this logistically, and sometimes when you work with horses, you have to think in this worst case scenario. If they just like whip their head up and stick their lip up all the time and somebody's walking in front of them, they could bash them right in the face. Like, Shadow only has one eye. There's a good chance that he might accidentally bop somebody in the face. So having them only do your tricks when you want them to is a matter of stimulus discrimination between environments and between stimuli, which we can get into another time. But I see that we have a question, so let me read it and then we'll see if we can answer it. So the question is, can you elaborate on probing? You mentioned probing for maintenance and probing for generalization. That's right, I did mention that, and I should have actually said programming for generalization and not probing for generalization, so good catch. Probing for maintenance. So essentially, like, if you teach a horse a skill and they, what is called master the skill, which has to be in your operational definition of, like, what your goal is for the skill. So what you'll see a lot of the times when you work with kids is like, oh, this skill will be considered mastered when they have scored 100% on it for 3 consecutive days. However you want to consider mastery with your horse is literally up to you. But the important thing for checking your maintenance and making sure that you're moving forward in the way that you should be is that once a horse masters a skill, don't stop practicing it. You have to keep going, otherwise they're going to lose the skill. And then probing for generalization, which would really be programming for maintenance. Oh my gosh, there are so many ways to go about programming for generalization, and it's this whole big thing. What you want to do the most with horses, and where you see generalization being the most paramount with horses, is through settings, right? So, especially for people who compete, if you practice something in your arena at home, then you want to be able to also practice that on a trail ride, or in the other arena, in the round pen, or when you trailer your horse off property at a show, you want them to also be able to do your flying lead changes, or your half passes, or what have you. So generalization, the main one you see in horses, and working with horses, is that you want them to be doing it across a variety of settings. So I even tried to do this a little bit yesterday with Roxy when I was teaching her to smile. Like I said, I had her on the cross ties, but halfway through I took her out into like the parking lot / like backyard of the barn, and just practiced doing it with her in different places. So it wasn't the environment that we were in that harnessed the stimulus control. It was me and my cue that I would give her that harnessed the stimulus control. So what you're looking for there is the difference between essentially like stimulus control and environments working as a discriminative stimulus versus generalizing your environments to a skill. Generalization is super complicated, and a lot of people are like, yeah, whether or not they can do it in different places, but there's so many different ways to program for generalization. That's actually a really good idea for us to talk about, because I feel like that's something that a lot of people struggle with. So thanks for following along. If you guys followed along, I feel like I just spewed so much information at you. So if you have questions, comment them, send us a message. We love to talk about this stuff, and we will 100% work with you in any way that we can to help you guys understand this. My goal is to help you guys be more successful with your horses. So if I can use the science from the Cooper text or any other behavior analytic skills and sort of share that with you to help you guys further your success with your animals, then I want to do that. So if there's something that I'm saying that seems like it means sense to me but doesn't make sense to other people, like, just say, hang on a second, I lost you, and that's fine. So yeah, thanks guys for following along. If you have any other questions, you can comment them now. I'm going to give you guys like 2 or 3 minutes in case there's any other comments. Otherwise, I'm going to just hang out for a second. Here I've got my nice little trusty mug with the logo. We might start selling stuff like that soon, so be on the lookout for that. And yeah, visit our website, www.shadowedbehavior.com. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube. We don't have a LinkedIn, but it's being considered. We have a Zoom. We've got everything. You can send us an email, shadowedbehavior@gmail.com. And I hope to hear from you guys soon. So it looks like there's no other questions. And on that note, we will be going for the day. Thanks for listening along. I hope you guys enjoyed this behavior about shaping and successive approximations and differential reinforcement. And yeah, have a good one. Thanks, guys.